It's January 3rd, 2026, 2 o'clock a.m. Explosions ripple through Caracas, Venezuela's capital. More than 120 aircraft from the US Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps traverse Venezuelan airspace, striking key infrastructure targets. The overwhelming aerial assault clears the way for what comes next, a ground operation. Flying low and fast toward the city, MH-47 Chinook helicopters carry Delta Force operators toward their target, the residence of Nicolás Maduro, the man who has held power over Venezuela for more than a decade. The mission is classified, known only to the highest ranks of the US government. After years of escalating tension between Washington and Caracas, President Trump has made his decision. Today, Maduro's reign ends. The mission objectives are clear: move fast, minimize enemy fire, breach Maduro's compound, and take him alive. But the target isn't hiding in some remote safehouse. Maduro is secured inside Fort Tiona, a sprawling military installation on the southern edge of Caracas, one of Venezuela's most heavily fortified positions. Intelligence reports indicate approximately 75 anti-aircraft battery sites line the approach route to his compound. Each one represents a potential threat that could ground the helicopters. A concrete wall surrounds the entire complex, patrolled by Venezuelan and Cuban military personnel. The building itself is a hardened target, reinforced steel doors designed to withstand forced entry, surveillance systems monitoring every approach, and deep inside, a fortified safe room where Maduro can retreat if the perimeter is breached. Months earlier, Maduro had taunted President Trump publicly and called him a coward.
Come and get me!
Now the Delta Force team stares down that challenge. Breaching his fortress won't be easy. After 2 hours of flying low across the Caribbean and into Venezuela, the compound appears on the horizon. The final approach begins. Back in Washington, the White House has made a calculated decision: to keep Congress in the dark. Administration officials deliberately withhold operational details, citing concerns that any leak could compromise the mission and endanger American lives on the ground. Now comes the hardest part: the breach. 150 F-22 and F-35 fighter jets conduct pre-assault strikes to clear Venezuelan air defenses and antennas along the flight path. However, during the approach, the US helicopters face heavy resistance from ground forces. One MH-47 helicopter suffers heavy damage, but the pilot keeps it airborne to complete the mission. Simultaneously, US forces strike a local power switching station, and additionally, US Cyber Command launches coordinated attacks, plunging the surrounding area into darkness. The blackout is deliberate, cutting off communications, disabling security systems, and creating chaos. Inside the compound, Maduro knows something is wrong. It's go time. Delta Force hits the compound hard, moving through a wall of hostile fire. Steel doors explode inward. Operators pour through the breach, advancing room by room. 1,500 miles away, President Trump watches from Mar-a-Lago, monitoring live feeds as the operation unfolds in real time. He would later describe what he witnessed. Venezuelan and Cuban guards fight back fiercely, but the Delta Force operators move with overwhelming speed and precision. They breach the main building and advance toward the interior. According to official reports, Maduro and his wife Cilia Flores are intercepted in a corridor, caught before they could reach the fortified safe room. The moment of capture is swift. No shots fired. Within minutes, both are secured, blindfolded, and fitted with soundproof headphones. The extraction team moves them to the waiting helicopters. Their destination is the USS Iwo Jima, stationed in international waters in the Caribbean. Maduro went to bed the president of Venezuela on January 2nd, and by the end of January 3rd, he was a prisoner. On the same day as the raid, the couple was flown to New York City, landing at Stewart Air National Guard Base shortly before 6 p.m. local time. Upon arrival, Maduro and Cilia were escorted off the aircraft by federal agents. From the airbase, they were transported via helicopter to the West Side heliport in Manhattan, and then moved by an armoured convoy to a Drug Enforcement Administration field office for processing. Maduro was ultimately remanded to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn. The US government unsealed a superseding indictment shortly after the capture, charging Maduro and Flores with narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation conspiracy, and various weapons charges, including the possession of machine guns and other destructive devices. Back in Venezuela, Maduro's deputy now holds the reins. Delcy Rodriguez, Maduro's vice president, is sworn in as the acting president of Venezuela on January 5, 2026. Her assumption of power follows an order from Venezuela's Supreme Tribunal of Justice, which directed her to take the interim presidency due to Maduro's absence. But how was this operation even possible? It certainly didn't come together overnight. According to intelligence officials, planning began as early as August 2025. The CIA allegedly deployed a clandestine team inside Venezuela, tracking Maduro's daily movements with intelligence from a high-level source who had penetrated his inner circle. Planners mapped every obstacle. Those 75 anti-aircraft batteries along the flight path, 3 Venezuelan airfields that would be destroyed only if fighters scrambled to intercept, and the layout of Fort Tiona itself. At a classified location, Delta Force constructed a full-scale replica of Maduro's residence. For months, operators rehearsed countless scenarios: how to breach the steel doors, what to do if Maduro barricaded himself in the safe room, how to take him alive if he refused to surrender. General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, later emphasized the purpose of the relentless rehearsals. No mistakes. The mission required the largest US military buildup in the region in generations. By late 2025, the fleet included the supercarrier USS Gerald R. Ford and the amphibious assault ship USS Iwo Jima, nearly a dozen warships carrying approximately 12,000 troops. Timing was everything. Planners deliberately chose the holiday season, betting that Venezuelan forces would be stretched thin with personnel on leave. The original strike date was intended for Christmas Day 2025, but adverse weather and the desire to avoid overlap with unrelated strikes against ISIS in Nigeria pushed the operation to the weekend after New Year's. The Trump administration argued that because Maduro was an indicted fugitive, the capture was a law enforcement action supported by military force, rather than an act of war, which they claimed granted the president inherent constitutional authority to act. But the criminal indictment, narco-terrorism, and drug trafficking told only part of the story. According to internal administration discussions and public statements that emerged after the operation, the motivations ran deeper. President Trump and his advisors explicitly identified access to Venezuelan oil reserves as, in their words, a core reason for the action. Trump publicly asserted that the United States was entitled to control these reserves as reimbursement for what he described as billions in stolen American assets, referring to Venezuela's nationalizations of foreign oil infrastructure in 1976 and again in 2007. But it wasn't just oil. The administration had its eyes on Venezuela's massive deposits of gold and rare earth minerals, critical resources for everything from smartphones to military hardware. Some foreign policy experts characterized the approach as a return to what they called resource imperialism. There was also unfinished political business. The disputed 2024 Venezuelan election, which the US and international observers condemned as fraudulent, had created a leadership crisis. The United States had already recognized opposition leader Edmundo Gonzalez as the legitimate president-elect in January 2025, viewing Maduro as an illegitimate strongman clinging to power through rigged votes. And finally, geopolitics. The operation sent a message far beyond Caracas. China, Russia, and Iran had all established deep ties with the Maduro regime, including investments, military cooperation, and strategic partnerships. The raid was a move to reassert American dominance in the Western Hemisphere and signal to global rivals that the US remained the preeminent power in its own backyard. But the operation came at a price that remains disputed. According to Reuters reporting, Cuba announced that 32 of its soldiers were killed during the operation. The remains arrived in Havana on January 15th in caskets draped with Cuban flags. Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel reportedly stated, "They heroically fell in defense of the sovereignty of a sister nation." The Venezuelan government confirmed at least 23 to 24 military officers lost their lives that day. No American lives were lost during the operation. This video was created using the resources available at the time. Links are in the description.